lovely moderator, Zhou Fang. Zhou, welcome.
Thank you, Dawn. I really want to laugh right now, but I'll do my best to be formal. Thank you all. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, PDX with team, and thank you to our ASL interpreters. And thank you everyone for attending this wonderful panel discussion today. And I cannot wait for you all to listen to our panelists. Before that, I have to do an opening statement, which is also really good. Isabel helped me with it. So here we go. If I ask you to picture a leader, who would come to mind? A simple internet image search illustrates that our perceptions of the word leader are largely influenced and narrowly defined by the dominant systems in which we live, play, and work. For those who are a part of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities, it is often the case that we are left out of those perceptions or missing from the data sets entirely. Not only do these images limit our perceptions of who can be a leader, they can also limit what we understand leadership to be. This is why I am very excited to be here today in conversation with three incredible women who are leading the future. My name is Zhou Fang. I am a DEI practitioner and the founder of Intersectional Group, a DEI practice that centers intersectionality and interconnectedness. I am honored to be today's moderator. Please allow me to introduce Padmasree Konadi, Virginia Luca, and Anna Medill. Padmasree is a 25-year veteran in tech, having built infrastructure and application software for a variety of industries and companies. She is the VP of Product Management at Tableau, a Salesforce company. Virginia Luca is a queer cis Palauan woman who was born in Palau and raised in Guam before moving to Oregon 20 years ago. She graduated from Portland State University with a Master's of Science in Educational Leadership and Policy, and she is currently an Operations and Policy Analyst with Oregon Health Authority. Anna Medill is the founder and CEO of Avenue, a B Corp digital and social media marketing agency for purpose-driven companies. Anna is passionate about having a meaningful impact on our community through volunteerism, and she currently serves on multiple boards. Let's welcome our panelists. So let's dive into the questions. And the first question is for Anna and Virginia. When was the first time you saw yourself reflected in leadership, and what was it like? Anna, you're first.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And first, I just want to say I love that PDX Wit is hosting this panel and spotlighting AAPI leaders and tech professionals. So thank you so much for doing this. The answer for me is really not until I was about 4 or 5 years into my career. And so my entire career has been in advertising agencies, digital marketing agencies, sort of creative agencies. And I have actually never worked with or for an Asian American leader or even a woman Asian American leader. So for me, it was about 4 or 5 years into my career, and I saw a woman who was actually on my advisory board for Avenue, my B Corp digital and social media agency that I founded. And she had become a partner at a research firm and had grown and built that into a really successful research company here in Portland. And I connected with her, and at that moment, I really felt like, wow, here is someone who looks like me, who has really embodied sort of her own authentic self and she's a Korean American as well. And I really had not seen that before. So it really kind of unlocked a new perspective or outlook on my career. And what I mean by that is throughout my career and in looking back, I've realized that I really learned the skill of assimilation. So in the workplace, it was assimilating into those different sorts of workplace environments and adopting the social norms of whatever workplace culture I happened to be in, and assimilating to acquire the necessary skills to advance and climb the ladder, which I did relatively quickly. And what I realized was I was becoming sort of a version of a leader that was not necessarily my authentic self. And throughout my career prior to founding Avenue, and I worked at 5 different marketing agencies at different points throughout my career, and I was continually asked, actually, as I kind of climbed the leadership ladder, to either adopt or acquire leadership traits that are most commonly associated with white male leaders, and in order to be more successful. And I think in some cases, yes, that might be true, but to be asked to be more like X person in order to be successful shaped the earlier parts of my career. So when I met my current mentor and an advisory board mentor at Avenue, and as a Korean American leader of her own company, it was really just a turning point for me into thinking about how I could really step into being my authentic self and express more of the leadership qualities that have since then at Avenue really proven to help me grow a company that is continually growing and has become quite successful. So I'll stop there, but thank you so much for the question.
Virginia?
Ali, everyone. Hi, Virginia Luca here. I use she and they pronouns. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming to this event and for having me speak today. Also, thanks for the little dose of some Lizzo. I'm always in the mood to listen to Lizzo to get my day started. And I also want to say happy Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. As I think about the first time that I felt myself reflected in leadership, I think about when I was at Southern Oregon University. I was part of the Hawaii Club, and every year we have a luau, and members of our club were invited to go to a PISA conference. PISA is Pacific Islander Student Alliance. That particular year, it was being hosted in Corvallis at Oregon State University, and it was the first time that I'd gone to a conference that it was run by Pacific Islander leaders, and about our history, who we are as leaders, how we can show up for our community. It was a really life-changing space for me, because typically when I go to conferences, I'm one of the only Pacific Islanders at a conference. And so it was amazing that we had this student alliance, and I'm so happy that it's still hosted every year. But one of the things that I learned was the importance of me understanding who I am, my history. It wasn't until I moved here to Oregon that I started to really think about, well, what is the history of colonization in Palau? What did my family go through? And really understanding that the kind of leader I want to be is more from a decolonized, re-indigenized lens. And so having a space to be able to meet with other Pacific Islander students who are also interested in leadership. And the reason why we're really interested in leadership is because in Pacific Islander cultures, typically our community is extremely important. There is no me, there's only we. And so we're constantly trying to see how can we give back to our community as leaders. So what was it like? It was uncomfortable. I was like, who, me? I'm not a leader. I don't know what you're talking about. But it wasn't until I started to ask my mom stories about our heritage. I had to leave my island to really learn more about me, honestly, right? And I learned that that Palauan culture is matriarchal and matrilineal. And I thought, that makes a lot of sense, because my mom was always in charge in the household. My mom, 4'10", right? She was the person that made all the big decisions in the house. My grandmother, my great grandmother, I was really lucky to grow up intergenerationally. And many people from our community would come to my house to talk to my mom, grandma, and great-grandmother about issues that were going on in the community, and sought their wisdom. But it wasn't until I was an adult that I realized what was happening. And so it took a little while for me to think about myself as a leader. And I think really what hit home was when I moved to Portland State University to earn my master's degree. I was hanging out in the Multicultural Center, and somebody came up to me and they're like, "Hey, are you an Islander?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm Palauan and white." And they're like, "Well, guess what?" So these folks, they just came up to me and introduced themselves. They wanted to create a student club called CAPAS, Coalition for Asia Pacific American Studies. And they need at least 5 leaders in order to make a club with SALP, student activities and leadership programs. And so we created this student organization, and I joined Leadership Fellows as a student leader with SALP. And that's really where I was able to start thinking about what are my values as a leader? What is my philosophy as a leader? Making sure that I can put my words to action. And yeah, so I think for myself, well, I didn't see myself as a leader when I first started college. And I also want to say, I didn't start college until I was in my 30s. I was married, I had 2 kids. My kids were really small, so I would balance them on my knees while I'm trying to type and turn in assignments. So when I went to college, I just saw myself as just wanting a better life for my kids. But I think going to college and meeting the people that I've met really helped me see myself as I am a leader and I need to show up in different ways and continue improving myself. So thank you for the question.
Padmasree. Thank you, Virginia.
Great. Wow, such beautiful stories to hear from Virginia and Anna. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the question as well. As I start to relate my experience, I think you will see a lot of differences in the way the 3 of us are sort of addressing a lot of these questions. Not only are our experiences different, our backgrounds are also different. While we were preparing for this for this panel really quickly, Virginia was the first one to remind us to say even AAPI is kind of bundling a whole different group of cultures that are all different. Our experiences are different. Me as a South Asian American, very different experience than someone who's a native island-based American versus someone who's come from Hong Kong or from some other part of the world. It's important for us to acknowledge and remember that these experiences are in fact unique. So thank you for reminding us that, Virginia. In terms of where I saw myself in leadership, I'll be quick. I came to the United States in my early 20s, came here to work and build a career for myself. While I'd been raised with a lot of, good sounding confidence and education at home to say you can go be whatever you want to be, when I first came to the United States, filled with imposter syndrome, filled with doubt about myself, filled with what can possibly be good about me while there's so much going on around. It was when I was at Sun Microsystems, which is one of the best places I worked at, to be honest. My manager and mentor at the time saw in me some capabilities that were well beyond what he thought was that of an individual contributor, and started to remind me and reinforce, yes, you have leadership skills, you have the ability to ask good questions, you have the ability to rally people around a mission. Leadership is not about the person who's leading, it's about who is following them. A lot of really great principles were instilled in me pretty early on, really good management training, which also, again, management and leadership kind of go hand in hand. But of course, you can be a leader without being a manager. But regardless of that, just that being seen, being recognized, being promoted, being championed, those were some aspects that helped me realize, oh, wow, okay, I can actually do this for other people. I can actually support other people, and I can actually lead. And that was sort of my experience.
Thank you, Padmasree, and thank you all. Our next question is, what were some of your biggest challenges and wins in your leadership journey? And the follow-up question is, did you see yourself as a leader before someone else believed in you? And we're going to invite Virginia first.
Okay, thank you so much. As I think about my leadership journey, I think other than going to the PISA conference and becoming a student leader with CAPAS, one of my biggest challenges was that recognizing, at Portland State University, that while Multnomah County and Portland, we have, a fairly large Pacific Islander community in our general population in the metropolitan area, but not so much at Portland State University. And I was wondering, where are these Pacific Islanders? Why do I not see them in my classroom? And thankfully at the time, they did disaggregate Asian from Pacific Islanders. So we could see the number of Pacific Islanders, and the numbers were just so sad. And so as a leader with CAPAS, one of the things that we asked for is we advocated for a cultural center, a Pacific Islander Asian American center, which now exists. We advocated for recruitment and retention specialists, which that position has been open and filled for years now. And we also asked for Asia Pacific Islander studies programs, because we recognized at such a large institution that there was not one Pacific Islander or Asian American classes. There's a lot of classes in regards to like Asia, the continent of Asia, right? And the Asian experience in Asia, but not so much the experience of Asian Pacific Islanders, Americans who travel here and live in the community. And so I went from a student leader to an advisor. So I got a job at Portland State University as an advisor, and I used my position to understand how does PSU work as an institution, who makes decisions about some of these programs that should exist. And I got myself on the Diversity Action Council, and I pushed for the things that CAPAS had asked for and many students before us. And I used my master's degree to get evidence as to why we needed Asian Pacific Islander programming at Portland State University. And to me, it's wonderful to be able to be an alum and walk to campus and actually go to the PIA Center and like actually be able to celebrate with Asian Pacific Islander students and be able to be like, wow, we fought for this and we made it happen, thanks to, making sure that like we ask for it. We're not ashamed to ask for it. We just go and ask for it, try to understand how decisions are made. And I think another thing I learned is, relationships are key for so many things, right? Being in the right space at the right time and knowing the right people. And to me, those are just amazing accomplishments, I think, for our community. Another challenge that I had in my leadership journey is because I am Palauan and white. My mom is Palauan and my dad is white. And so what you see here as a light-skinned Islander, I struggle in my own community because Palauans don't see me as Palauan. And we do have a Palauan association here in the Portland area, Rangalagal Belao. And my uncle is pretty much in charge of the organization. And anytime I go to a Palauan event, so many people will look at me and say, and I speak and understand Palauan, and they'll ask people like, who is this person? Why is she here? What Palauan is she here with? And so like I really struggled since I was young to have my own people not recognize me. Like I feel like I'm never going to be Palauan enough, and I'm never going to be white enough either. And so my leadership journey has been a struggle, because sometimes they'll say, why are you trying to help the Pacific Islanders? Why are you trying to help Palauans? You're not Palauan. And I'm like, yeah, actually I am. So constantly have to prove myself. I constantly have, and because we're a matrilineal country, culture, they're always like, well, who's your mom? What island are you from? So I have to say, my mom is Tomomi Pedro. We're from Ngayao, we're from Oragiblay clan, right? Like I have to be able to state that. And even then I still have to prove, right? So I constantly feel as a Palauan woman leader who's also queer, that queerness in my community is extremely taboo, right? And so that's another challenge that I've had, is people judging me for my queerness. And it hurts so much, right? But I still show up for my community. I still try to do everything in my power to make sure that our community gets what they need. And I think the last thing I'll share with you is during this pandemic, so many of our BIPOC, our Black, Indigenous, people of color, our tribal communities, so many folks hurt so bad with COVID-19, especially our Indigenous folks, our Native American folks, and our Pacific Islanders. We had really high numbers of infection, death, and hospital rates. And when I was with Multnomah County, I had to really fight for the, for our healthcare industries to be able to say, like, we are hurting and you need to do certain things for our community specifically that is community led. You need to go to us as community leaders to help ourselves. And so we were able to really like funnel federal, state, and local dollars to Pacific Islander serving organizations. When I started at Multnomah County, they did not know that there was a lot of Pacific Islander organizations that serve ourselves. Many times, money would go to Asian Pacific American organizations, right? But very little of that money will actually go to Pacific Islanders. And so being able to change narrative and say, hey, there's Pacific Islander organizations that serve Pacific Islanders, please give them the money to serve themselves. So that was a really big win, I think, for our community to be able to have some of that money in order to have community health workers, be able to have things translated in our various languages, and have things that are more culturally relevant to our community during this time of COVID. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Virginia. That's really powerful. Anna, would you like to add on?
Sure. Yeah. So I think one of my biggest challenges is just early on, and it's actually part of the second piece of the question, which was around, did you see yourself as a leader before someone else believed in you? And the answer is yes, actually, I did. But it's funny because one of the challenges is I'm incredibly driven. I'm ambitious, hardworking, but I'm also an introvert, incredibly shy as a child. So I think especially early on in my career, and especially as I was growing up, leading into career, those two things were at odds. And I think I fell into the trap of the model minority myth very frequently, working hard, heads down, quiet, dutiful, all of those things. And because I was good at that, but also had this constant sort of battle with sort of my ambition and my drive. And so I didn't really know how to put those two things together at first. And so I think that was one of the biggest challenges. And, part of, I think, the being that shy and that introvert is in the early parts of my career, I didn't really look like a real executive or a leader at all, or even a growing sort of professional in the workplace. And as I've sort of built my career and grown that experience, I've been told that I don't look like a real executive or a CEO, or that I don't have real experience. And whether it's the youth or the quieter tone of voice, or those sorts of just authentic inherent traits that I have, those were sort of the biggest challenges that I faced sort of growing my career. And then in tying back to my first response to your first question, which was a great one, was when I did finally see someone who looked like me, who was in a leadership role. That was a real turning point for me to think to myself, wow, there's people who can actually be successful by leaning into some of the strengths or the traits or the characteristics of who they are, and leaning into those in a way that actually becomes a real leadership strength. And so I think that answers the question. But the wins have really been as I moved on to Avenue, and we just crossed our six-year anniversary, and I have never been a part of an organization that's had such a collaborative, empathetic, supportive culture that's also incredibly driven. We do great work, we work hard, but it's a way in which everyone feels a lot of trust and really truly supports one another. And it's a safe environment, and we're able to have conversations. We do a lot of work around anti-racism, dismantling white supremacy culture in the workplace. And those aren't really easy conversations to have in a typical or in any workplace, or even with friends or family. And yet sort of the environment and the safe space that we've created has enabled some of those conversations to happen. And also when feedback has to be shared, there's room, and we have continued to work on sort of building that culture of feedback. So I think some of the inherent traits that I battled with earlier on in childhood and in my career ended up and are serving me well at this point in time.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Anna. Our next question is, for those in the AANHPI community who are new to leadership or aspiring to leadership roles, what advice do you have for avoiding or breaking the so-called glass or bamboo ceiling? Padmasree, would you like to opine?
Yeah, absolutely. And for those who are not aware, bamboo ceiling was, I think, a term that was coined back in 2005 or so, with some research work that was done in the context of how Asian Americans who are typically associated with or correlated with higher levels of education and potentially even higher entry levels into tech, or don't necessarily find themselves in leadership positions and face something called a bamboo ceiling, which is an actual obstacle to their growth. I'll again sort of relate back to my own experience and sort of keep it to maybe something that's representative of the South Asian American community. But of course, take this with a grain of salt and see what might be applicable to you. In terms of what sorts of tips and sort of suggestions I might offer on folks who are aspiring to be in leadership, I'll say a few things, right? First, focus on yourself. In other words, look inward, because that's the one place we can control, right? So to start with, whether it is believing in yourself more, or it is, in my case, challenging some of the value systems that I was raised with, respect authority, respect elders, the white man must know more, thanks to some of the colonization that we've gone through in India. It's all deeply ingrained. So take a moment to think even around what biases you yourself might be. I hope I'm not saying something controversial, but, examine where you might be holding yourself back, and see if you can sort of work through some of those. And it's been a long and hard journey for me to realize, oh, wow, this young, 20-something white male is able to so quickly talk about their feedback on a particular thing, but I have so many more deep, thoughtful things to say, but I'm not saying anything because I'm holding myself back. Can I start being more vocal, as an example? Right. So that's the first thing I might say. The second thing is, if you are in the position of changing jobs, or you're interviewing actively for a role, say data scientist came up at the top of this call, that's an excellent and lucrative profession. Pick your company carefully, not only for what they do or what they're working on, what tech they're working on, but also what their culture stands for. During your interviews, ask a lot of questions. What is it like? How does the written culture manifest in day-to-day? You will get a pretty good idea, is this a company you want to work at or not? And that can also be something that's a precursor to whether or not you're going to see good leadership growth in that company. So when you make those career changes, take the time to understand the cultural implications as well. I just have a couple more things lots to say on this topic. Another thing I've noticed time and time again, the people who get promoted are the ones who get seen, right? So think about where and how you might seek visibility for the work that you're doing. It may be in the form of finding a sponsor inside your organization, and a sponsor is not a mentor. It's someone hired in leadership. Does not have to be Asian American, could be anybody, someone who happens to connect with, support with, and champions your work. Having visibility for the work that you do is almost as important as the work itself sometimes, because this is deep rooted in me. Self-advocacy is not something that comes to me often, right? You're taught humility, you're taught keep your head down, but it's almost the opposite of what you need in the workplace, because you have to be an advocate for yourself. And if that visibility is there and available to you, then it provides a platform for your own growth. And then a couple other things I'll say. One, when it comes to manager relationships, like your people manager relationships with your own manager supervisor, spend some time really articulating what success looks like in your role. Be objective about it, because one of the things that people who face the bamboo ceiling face that other, say, average white Americans don't, is that typically average white Americans are reviewed for their work, but a lot of times people of Asian backgrounds actually are more evaluated for their identity, or the evaluations can be more subjective. So if you take the time to sit down with your manager and write down what success looks like in your role very articulately, and you go achieve those things, then you can come back and hold them accountable to say, hey, you know what, I have achieved what I need to achieve. What does it take to get to the next level? And then the last thing I'll say is paid forward. None of us got here without the support of other people. And so always be investing in, whether it's an ERG, whether it is supporting other voices in the room, whether it is asking questions, make sure that you're also trying to actively contribute to creating safety for other people in your organization so that, everybody can rise.
Thank you, Padmasree. Those are very practical. Virginia, would you like to pile on?
Yes, thank you so much. I think I just think back to my own personal experience when I was a student, being invited to join a student organization as a leader. If you're a student, that is an amazing way of actually getting the experience while, so I'm going to just be honest, right? I learned by doing, making mistakes, correcting and trying again. And so many times when I was an advisor, I would have students come to me and say, oh, I'm not a leader. I don't think I could do this. And I'll say, well, that's what you have us to help guide you, right? Like I was very lucky to have someone guide me through this process. So let me help guide you. So just telling my story about, I didn't think I was a leader either until someone asked me to give it a try. And another thing for folks who are maybe newer in their career or just trying to help themselves get to another leadership role is there's so many mentorship and leadership programs. This program offered a mentorship program in the very beginning, or people who want to be mentors. There's so many that are available that are constantly looking for people that they want to help support. Another thing is become a board member of an organization that you have the same type of values and mission. Maybe I've sat on many boards. I've also helped to start organizations, and I love it when new folks come to me and say like, oh, I don't think I can sit on a board, and I'll say, well, why not? Right? Like you don't know you can do it until you give it a try. And so pick a board that is going to help you develop those skills that can hold your hand through the process if needed. Also, if you are already in a workplace, see if you have any employee resource groups. Perhaps you can start with a leadership there. Employee resource groups are really amazing, I think, because it really focuses on trying to connect with people like yourself. You can have a caucus space. And I think they're a really great way in order to be seen, in order to be helping your community out. So those are some of the things that I have told people in my life about how to get on track on leadership roles. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. A quick time check. We have 3 more main questions to go, and I would love to go through all of them because I love them. So speak as quickly and clearly as you can. Our next question is, how do you lead through collaboration? And what are your experiences with shared leadership? Anna, would you like to go first?
Sure. Yeah, so this is a really great question. I think I've experienced environments where it's been the complete opposite, but my approach to this is one, we have a very collaborative approach to decision-making and leadership at Avenue. But I think it really starts with first having a vision, sort of a mission, a purpose, and core values that really guide the company and guide the team or decision-making. And so that's my role, is to set the vision, the purpose, the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal, and then involving my entire team. And then I have really 2 key leaders at this point who are sort of part of that leadership team, but I do involve the entire company in strategic planning on a quarterly basis for Avenue. And what I've found is, we don't make decisions by consensus, but it's a process of soliciting input. And so making sure that everyone on the team feels heard, that they're their feedback, their opinion, their experience has been shared. And we may take that and utilize it and come to a decision. We may not, but at least the team has been seen, they've been heard. And so really seeking that input and collaboration with leadership and as well as with team members. And I think that just my experience with that has created a culture that's really highly engaged. And I've been in environments that are less so, and maybe more of a top-down approach that is really sort of disengaged employees. And my hope as we sort of move and sort of iterate through this process is to keep a really highly engaged team who feels like their opinions and their feedback matter, and that they really are contributing to the growth and the evolution and success of Avenue.
Thank you, Anna. Virginia, would you like to add on?
Yeah, thank you. I think I normally start with helping folks clarify what the difference is between collaboration and cooperation, right? Collaboration is when whatever we're building, it's because it happened with all of us from start to finish. Where cooperation is, I already have a plan, I just need you to go along with it. So really, if we're trying to do collaborative work, that we really are starting from the very beginning on the same level and building whatever it is going to be together. Also starting out with community guidelines, right? Standards, like how are we going to be doing this work together, like Anna said. And then leading by example. A lot of times I try to hold myself back from doing the work and guiding other people to say, look, how would you want to do this, right? Well, let's give it a try, having them, give things a go instead of me telling people how to do something. I'm more of a constructivist of, I have some ideas, but I want to hear about what do you want to try to do? And then also another thing that's really important to me when I'm doing shared leadership is understanding people's learning and communication styles, right? Like some people want to be in a room together in order to like read body language. Other people want just spreadsheets on everything, and I love spreadsheets myself. So, but just really learning and adapting to different people's learning styles and their communication styles, so that we can always kind of be on the same page. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. I think this question leads to our next question very well. What are your thoughts on a mentorship for members of the AA and HPI community? Have you ever failed as a mentor? And how would you have handled the situation differently? We're going to ask Pat Mercury to go first.
Okay, I'll be super quick. Time me. Yeah, I absolutely, I think mentorship is one of the most underrated resources that one might find in their career. Strongly, 100% of people I know in the workforce, I wish that everybody had mentorship, particularly folks who come from marginalized communities of any form. The irony is that I think a lot of young and growing professionals don't actually know or don't value or don't prioritize mentorship as much as they should. So if there's any opportunity or any situations where I feel like I failed as a mentor, it's because of this dichotomy, right? The fundamental premise of mentorship is that the mentee, the person seeking support, is supposed to take the initiative, right? So there have been moments and situations in my life where I've openly offered myself as a mentor. We've had some conversations, but this person peters off, or they don't understand what ways they can leverage this resource that's available to them. And I'm assuming, of course, that I'm a decent mentor, right? That notwithstanding. But in situations where folks didn't realize the value and didn't seek it fast enough, I wish I had reached in and checked in more and really helped pull through what could have been something that I then chalked out to be lack of initiative on their part. So if anything, as I take on new mentors, I actively have this conversation with them about actually prioritizing their own career growth and making sure that they really pull as much as they can from the mentors that they have. And you never need to have just one mentor. You can have multiple for different reasons.
Thank you, Pat Mercury. Virginia, would you like to add as well on mentorship?
Yes, I definitely agree with everything that she just mentioned. And when I think about my own failure as a mentor, I think what I started to do, because I recognized this mistake I was making, I didn't sit down and kind of make like almost like a mentor contract or like expectations, right? Like, how do you as a mentor want me to show up? You know, and these are the expectations I would love for you as someone I'm going to be my mentee. I think in the beginning, I just accepted anybody who wanted me as a mentor because they were so excited to have a Pacific Islander, you know, working at Portland State University, and they would just show up at my door and be like, Auntie, can you mentor me? Like, okay, right? Because I thought mentorship was very important, and I still think is very important. But I do feel right when I'm not sure what somebody needs from me, I'm not going to make it happen, right? Um, and then I do feel like I'm failing them. So very early on, I have like this conversation of, you know, you're asking me to be your mentor. Can you tell me why? What are the things you need me to do with you? Right. And okay, if I'm going to take you on, this is what I expect. Like, this is how many times, you know, you're going to meet with me. And this is, you know, how I can help you out. So that to me is so important. Another time I feel like I failed somebody, um, was a situation had arise between them and an elder in the community. And being a Pacific Islander, it's so hard to tell elders in the community like anything, right? Normally we just have to like listen and be like, okay, auntie and uncle. Um, I think in this point, I probably should have said, you know what, no, let me, like, I think I should have showed up more for the mentee, right? Instead of just letting them like listen to the elders. Like, I personally think that I should have done more pushback, but my cultural upbringing was just like, oh, I can't do this, I can't do this. But now I regret it. Now I'm just like, I should have said something, right? Like, so that's something that, yeah, that's just my own personal what I struggle with when I was thinking about how I failed as a mentor. And I think about that person all the time. So thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. Live and learn. We all do that. Here comes our last question for today. As leaders, how do you make room for those who are coming up after you? We're going to invite Anna to talk about that first.
From my personal experience and not really having, you know, many Asian American AAPI leaders or mentors to look up to, I feel like it's just really important to stay in leadership or be available so that others coming up behind can see themselves represented in leadership and executive positions. And at Avenue, we do a couple of different things. You know, one, we participate in the Emerging Leaders Internship Program, where every summer we bring on an intern from one of the colleges, universities around the state, and provide them with an internship that is going to give them experience. And it's BIPOC juniors and seniors, I believe, or maybe sophomores, juniors, and seniors, providing them an opportunity to get real life work experience in a supportive environment, teaching them skills that will be beneficial to them later on in their professional or educational career. And then we also look at job descriptions in a little bit of a different way as well, where we certainly have our list of criteria, but, you know, and we hope that other organizations will do something or are doing something like this, but not requiring that candidates have to have every single or check every single box, because I do think that prohibits a lot of AAPI new people in their career from advancing or getting a role that will help them get their foot in the door. So, you know, we're evaluating for a multitude of different factors, and skill set and experience is one of them, but it's not the only deciding factor. And in fact, we have certainly brought on team members knowing that we would have to train them, coach them, but wanting to give them an opportunity to get experience and contribute in a meaningful way to our organization.
That's really cool, Anna. Thank you. Padmasree, would you like to opine?
Yeah. The piece that was already talked about, mentorship, right? Become a mentor, offer yourself, make some time for it, and it will pay back forward into the community in ways that you don't realize. The other piece, Anna started to talk about this at the very start of the call about being authentic and owning your brand. When I first came to this country and I started to immerse myself into my career, I actually also immersed myself actively in blending in and fitting in and not actually standing out. I tried to fix my accent. I tried to do the things that other white folks around me were doing. Instead, I have actively in the last 10 years or so worked in the opposite direction to truly own what it is to be my identity. And when I see youngsters, like, folks I know who have joined the company recently or whatever, when they own their identity so unabashedly, it brings me so much joy. I wish that was something I knew how to do right from the beginning. So I would say, if you own your identity as a leader, you will also be modeling it for other people, that it's okay for them to show up the way they're showing up. And then leadership also comes with a lot of power. So use that power well. There are things that a person in power can do that a person without power cannot do. As an example, in my past jobs, I've held my people team, HR team, whoever, accountable to share more diversity stats, to have more public conversations about showing up, right? Put your money where your mouth is as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. You can do those things as a manager, as a VP, as a director, whatever. Use your voice usefully to advocate for what needs to happen and change needs to happen, because it's people in positions of power, unfortunately, who still tend to own a lot of the decision-making capabilities. And so if you can influence that, that'll be great. And the last thing, model by being a learner. Focus on your own growth. Just because you became a leader doesn't mean you've arrived. We all need to be on this continuous journey of learning. And the more you're learning and rethinking and evaluating and changing, folks will see that as a path for them as well.
Thank you very much, Padmasree. And thanks to all of our panelists today. And we're at time. I wish we had more time for some Q&A and some reflection. So the last 30 seconds, does anyone have any final thoughts or sentence want to share before we wrap up today's events?
Just thank you.
Thank you, Joe, for putting such a great panel together and for the questions. And of course, to our ASL interpreter, to Dawn, to Isabel, to PDXWit. Yeah, thank you all for having us.
Thank you all. Please connect on LinkedIn, and happy AAPI Heritage Month.
You too.
Yay, thank you. Komaral masulang. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.